Hello and welcome to our program, Where God Weeps, a program where we talk about the situation of the suffering church around the world. Today we're going to be considering the country of South Sudan, one of the world's newest nations, and yet a country facing steep challenges, great difficulties both internally and pressures from outside. A lone voice in search of giving hope and providing shelter for those most in need is the Catholic Church. And with us today is the Auxiliary Bishop of Juba, South Sudan, His Excellency Bishop Santo Loku Pio. Your Excellency, thank you for being with us here today in our program.
It is my pleasure, Mark, to be with you today.
Your Excellency, you were ordained a priest in 2001. 12 years later, you are a bishop. Was this a shock for you when you received your nomination, you received the call, so to speak?
Well, it was really like a nightmare. I didn't expect. I was assistant parish priest of the cathedral at that time when this news came up, and I really couldn't have words to say. And when I was asked to say either yes or no, I just couldn't say anything because I was a bit confused.
Yes. And so how did you resolve it? Did you go to the chapel? Did you find time to pray about it? Or were you obliged to give an answer immediately?
I was actually obliged to give an answer immediately, although I have to pray. You are just trying to say, to pray for what now? Because the Holy Father wants your answer. And if you say no, you are disobeying the Holy Father. And for us as Catholics, to disobey the Holy Father will be the greatest sin one could commit. And so it's just to say yes, and let's see what God is having for us.
So you took this cross on your shoulder?
I took the cross on the shoulder. You can see me having a big cross now.
Now you're one of 9 children. Was the Catholic faith something important in your family life? And how was this lived, if you will?
It was very, very important because my paternal uncle, who is the brother of my father, was a great catechist. And so through him, I got a lot of inspiration because I was always with him, and he was teaching catechism, and he was a dedicated catechist in school. And so I followed the way of his life, and that touched me very much and gave me this inspiration.
To become a priest?
To become a priest, yes.
Your Excellency, Juba, of course, is the capital of the world's newest nation, a little bit more than 2 years old now. Can you tell us a little bit about the situation in South Sudan? The people have been flooding back from the north. How would you describe the situation now? Is it still one of hope?
At the moment, I would say the situation is of a greater hope, although there are a lot of complex ideas that could come to somebody's mind because you know, we have been scattered all over the world. You know, South Sudanese have gone all over, and the majority of them are coming back with different ideas. And so coping up with the situation in South Sudan, and especially in Juba, that has become a cosmopolitan city, let me say, things are practically moving in different directions. But still we could see in the face of the South Sudanese a greater hope of rehabilitation, getting back to reality. Although there are difficulties and challenges which are of enormous, I think, capacity, because, you know, getting to start everything from scratch is not all that easy.
Do you still find yourself now involved, but now in a much more complex situation, if you will? It's the birth of a new country and the establishment of a new country. Yeah,
I say reality is a very complex situation at the moment where the church finds itself. First of all, by the contradictions that are brought up by all these South Sudanese that have gone out and now they're coming in with different cultures, different mentality, the church finds itself in a bigger challenge. The other challenge is the number of people is increasing, and so the capacities of the church to handle some of these difficulties is becoming more and more a big challenge. The number of personnel we have, the question of accommodation in terms of schools, for instance. We had schools and helping in education, let us say, but then these schools, out of a very sudden movement of thousands and thousands of people into the city, now they become completely overwhelmed numbers. And so you get over 200 children in one class, 140, 130. And so it's a big challenge, and everybody's looking into the church, because the church has been a player throughout the time of the struggle, and now people are still eyeing the church to do even more in this situation.
How do you cope? I mean, you're not so many yourself, you don't have any resources of your own, and how do you respond to all of these demands that are flooding in to you as a person, but also to the structure of the church?
It is a challenge. We can't run out of it. We do what we can. With the little resources we have, we do what we can. But still the demand is so great that we cannot cope up with what we would like to do.
Your Excellency, you mentioned resources, and of course the principal resource for South Sudan is oil. South Sudan pumps something equivalent to 350,000 barrels of oil per day, and it is the principal generation of income. The challenge, of course, being that the pipeline to get the oil to market has to run through the north. What risk is this for the country, for this dependency on oil, and not only, but the dependency also on the north?
You know, everything surrounding the oil industry in South Sudan is a bit complex. The complexity is that, you know, the oil deposits are in South Sudan, and South Sudan is like a landlocked land that has to search for an outlet to transport its oil. I think it was deliberately planned by the governments in Khartoum to make sure that the oil passes through Port Sudan, and the only port of that of the country by then, and it is practically the longest in the distance. Yet, when South Sudan became independent, it has to inherit this difficulty that has been posted, and it is clear that the North could not allow the South go, and the South decided to go by ballot and a referendum. And that's why the negotiations could not proceed, because the northern government could not imagine that they are losing the resource they had invested on. And not only the northern government, let me say, other players of the international community involved in the oil industry are part and parcel of the difficulties that we have at the moment. And so it is a bit perplexed, it is a bit confusing. And so unless the players in the world really gives us a chance to be able to have a fair transfer route and be able to get hold of these resources, even these 350,000 barrels a day, I think is just a nightmare.
So you don't see the fruits necessarily of this oil that is being pumped out of the country every day?
So far until today, no. Simply because what we know now, the NGOs and other international communities that are present on the ground are really continuing helping. And you can see whether if it is in the field of education, if it is in the fields of infrastructure, the European community, the US government through USAID and other UN agencies are embarking. But you cannot see the oil money being used at this particular instant. In the beginning, we've been hearing that, okay, it has been used for keeping the government and setting up the structures and paying the salaries and whatsoever. But the developmental part of it has not yet been seen directly on the ground.
There are still a number of issues to be resolved with the North. One of them is the border, another one is citizenship, and a third, of course, is the split, to be determined how much money the North receives, or rather Sudan now, receives from South Sudan for the transport of oil through its territory to the port of Sudan. What challenges are still here, and what progress has been made, if you will, on these different areas?
You see, the major challenge is the term compromise. You know, the international community and everybody would like to compromise. They are asking South Sudanese to compromise and maybe asking the North Sudanese to compromise. The reality on the ground is completely different. South Sudan is known, the borders of South Sudan are known, and the complexity is only that the oil is discovered and the oil is in the south. And so the territory that holds the oil deposit are in the south. And so now that the geographical demarcation indicates very clearly that these areas belongs to the south, the international community is asking the south to compromise, and that's where, you know, it is getting it difficult to negotiations, because historically speaking, people know where the north ends and where the south begins. It is only through players like the international community and practically the U.S. and the UN community to be able really to help us reach a better solution on that area. But then if it is only left to the two parties, I don't think they will reach a compromise.
This famous compromise.
The famous compromise will not be reached, because everybody is asked to compromise what is claiming to be his, and so that's where, you know, the whole issue is.
China has also been a player, if I understand correctly, because of their interest in the oil.
I think so. Not only China, maybe other players, but I think China is part and parcel of the oil industry in Sudan and in South Sudan. They have had agreements, they have signed memorandum of understanding, they are playing a role of the excavation of oil in the Sudan, and so they have to be part and parcel of it. And so they are trying their best to reach these negotiations. But again, the question of the compromise becomes an issue, because the first thing which we know is that China believed that the oil belongs to the north, because the first time they came to South Sudan and they came to excavate and to drill the oil, they came to Khartoum, and so they agreed with the government in Khartoum. And now all of a sudden, the ownership has to change. And so China has to play a diplomatic relations here and be able to cope up with the two friends whom they really wanted to support. And so that's where really the dilemma is. And so China finds himself or herself in between the two governments.
Difficult situation.
In a difficult situation. They thought they have signed the contracts and the agreement with the owner of the oil, and then out of a sudden somebody came up who said, this is not the owner of the oil, I am the owner of the oil. And so China has to play this role, and they have to help us to continue and really reach a better deal.
I want to come back to the question of the resources and the trickling down of the income that is to come, hopefully one day, from the oil, because South Sudan is facing some considerable social challenges. 9 out of 10 South Sudanese are living about on the level of the poverty line, if not below. 80% of the population is illiterate, and these are extraordinarily high and figures of concern for South Sudan. What is the challenge, and how can the Church help here with regard to these questions of illiteracy and poverty?
In the question of illiteracy and the question of poverty, all these are true challenges. We've been living over 50 years of war, and we have never reached really a stage of development. People are still emanating from the traditional way of living and communicating and try to learn what can be learned. This is a big challenge, and as we are starting in this situation, the Church is trying to organize itself through its organizations that are present to be able to look for ways on, first, how to give our people better education, better chance of education, how to give to our people better chance of health. Right now in South Sudan, we don't have proper hospitals. This is a big challenge. We have clinics, and if they reach to major cases, the innocent and the poor people are the ones suffering.
I think so there's a statistic that says like something to the effect that 30 to 40% infant mortality, for example, in South Sudan. This must be very difficult for you to see and to watch and to feel at the same time a bit impotent with regard to all of this overwhelming wave of challenges, if you wish.
As a priest, I was working with in northern Juba in a place called Tarakeka. And there I was living among these Mundari people in the border with the Dinka, Bor and Yorol and so on. You can hardly see a hospital. What do you expect? people die, there are no roads, and when it rains, there are no bridges. You have to carry people on your shoulder to carry them over 20 miles, 50 miles, just to get a clinic where they can have maybe a pill to reduce the pain, but not a hospital. And so the question of child mortality is just a definite issue. And so it is a big challenge that is in us. And so we have to pick it up and lobby through our own agencies to help us to reach out to these poor people who are really in their need. If even in the capital city in South Sudan at the moment, we don't have proper medical structures. People are still dying of malaria, people are still dying of diarrhea, people are still dying of
all easily
treatable diseases and sicknesses. So this is a difficulty, and sometimes some people even are asking themselves, are our doctors trained? The so-called, we are calling doctors, because if somebody is just dying of malaria in the morning, recently I lost one of my cousin's daughter. She's 16 years of age. She has just very simple complication in school, brought to the hospital, and she died. So this is very, very complex situation, and we are really looking forward to see that a new dawn should come, and we put our hands and resources together and try to see whether we can give some provisions for a better medical and educational facilities for our sons and daughters.
The ending of the civil war between North and South and the establishment of South Sudan as the newest country brought with it its own problems. And one of those problems is, of course, the, if you will, the de-icing of all the ethnic tensions between the different tribal groups that live in South Sudan. And recently there has been an upsurge of violence between different ethnic groups. What is the challenge? Where is this coming from? And what can be done in this question?
Well, as South Sudanese, I think we are tied up to our ethnicity. And that's one thing the world should know, and maybe our people should know. Somebody is coming from a particular ethnic group with which he is attached, you know, through cultural setup. That's one thing. The second thing is the policy of the divide and rule. You know, in history, South Sudan has been a landlocked country, and I think there had been a lot of these wars going on, and I think maybe in a smaller scale, because people were using traditional weapons. But now, AK-47 has become really a stick in everybody's hand. So, over marriages people do fight. I think over grazing people do fight. I think over, I don't know, cultivation people do fight. But I think that time it has been a smaller scale because of the use of weapons. Right now it has escalated because the war has brought in so many guns that are in the hands of the youth, and the youth are still going with that traditional mentality of trying to raid or trying to possess other things and so on. This can only be brought down through a lot of peaceful initiative, and much more for us as church now. We believe that through education, through Christian education, that has to penetrate to our people, which means we have to train catechists to send them among the people to be able to teach them the value of life. We have to train teachers who has to go and establish schools and be able to let these children understand and give something to these youth who are already with guns. You have to have an alternative. If I have a gun and I live by it, and so that is a challenge even our security government is finding it difficult. What do I do to give to this young man to drop his gun in order to embrace something new? And I think this has to take time, and we have to work hard on that replacement.
To put the gun away and take the pencil in the hand.
The pencil and the pen. That will be the better way, Mark.
Are the youth being instrumentalized, and is there an interest to see South Sudan fail?
I think in one way or another, yes. The political groups up to today, most of them who have been generals and warlords who are not used to sitting in office, find themselves definitely in a disadvantage. They have spent energy in war, they have been fighting, and now they have come and they are told you need to have papers to be executive director or to be in such a place. And they are in their disadvantage. So they go back to escalate and find that this is an easy way of getting resources. And so these poor youth who have been in this situation also for long. Also embrace that. And that's where you hear about militias, you hear about, this group going to attack here and there and so on. It is only this scenario. And we are telling our government to be able not to throw away the war combatants and help them and support them, give them the possibility of having a decent life, something to replace really what they have fought for. And I think our government is trying to work hard to see that done. We hope so.
I want to address a little bit, we've talked about the oil, we've talked about the violence. I would like to talk a little bit about the hope, the future. Where do you see the hope for South Sudan? Where do you put your treasure, if you will, in the future of South Sudan?
Well, I think as a young nation and as a church person, I have a very high hope, because this has been the will of the people that they need to be free. But the challenges that are enormous is to be addressed through education. And I think if I have a treasure, I will put it in education. And secondly, in health. I put education first because that is now the challenge ahead of us, to try to learn to live. And then health, to be able to provide medical services to the needy, especially to children and women, which is a bigger challenge at the moment that we are facing, about child mortality and women dying in labor. And I think this is a big challenge that we as church are also focusing at. And people are coming to us every day and asking, Bishop, when are you building the church hospital? Because we don't trust the government hospital. You go in there, there are no medicines and there are no doctors. When are you building our church hospital? And I think this is the question that is deep in my heart, and it is making it more and more a big challenge to be able to address these twofold.
Do you not feel overwhelmed? Do you not feel sometimes you think, how, Lord, do you wish me to answer to all of these cries for help?
It is not only overwhelming, but I'm getting more confused, because you get up in the morning, you see all these challenges by yourself. I just live next to our school at Kator, at St. Teresa's, and I could see these children getting into class, and they have to come and do their exams at the veranda or outside the classroom, because the classroom is not conducive for doing examination, and I cannot help them. These women coming in looking for medical support, and I cannot help them. It is a big challenge. Somebody is like, what am I doing here? Who is out there to help me suit this situation, help this, build more classrooms, get a possibility of medical services to the people? Who is out there to help me to do that? I think these are questions coming up in somebody's mind, and say, you wish that Jesus gives you the miracle.
Your Excellency, thank you for having been with us today on our program.
Thank you, Mark.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for having been with us today on our program, Where God Weeps. And if you'd like to help, to pray, or to give some kind of concrete support to His Excellency, I would encourage you to look at the contact information at the end of this program. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Take care.